Stop calling me a Nazi, you fascist. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, Vice President and anointed Democrat presidential nominee Kamala Harris doesn't seem to have a clue about running an effective presidential campaign or much of anything else for that matter, as we've covered here over this last year. I guess you could say to call her campaign scattershot would be an insult to 12-gauge shotguns with a 3-inch barrel. But her latest is it's just new. My hot air colleague David Strom put it this way. He said in 2016 you were deplorable. If you remember, that's what Hillary Clinton called us. In 2020 you were a vector of infection and death. This year you're a Nazi. So David asked, what will Republicans be in 2028? He says probably genocidal cannibals from space who want to serve man. That's neither here nor there. We've got 2024 to deal with first. Bill, I don't know if you saw this, but after Trump's big Madison Square Garden rally on Sunday, that's when all the Nazi references really started to come out. Not at Trump. There's nothing new about that. Democrats have been comparing every presidential candidate to Hitler since 1944, believe it or not. So that's old hat. But this idea of calling potential voters, roughly half of America, Nazis, that's something new, isn't it? That's crossing a line.
Well, we're already racist, transphobic, homophobic, misogynistic, knuckle-dragging idiots who are anti-vaxxing, just how long a list of insults do you want, Steve?
Well, there you go.
That old adage is really true, that Republicans think that Democrats are stupid and Democrats think that Republicans are evil. We think they're misinformed and that they form their opinions based on things that are just plain not true. They're convinced that we're just the living soul of evil. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm sick of it. Not that that's going to stop it. Is it Goodwin's Law?
Godwin's Law, yeah.
Yeah. That any discussion on the internet will eventually devolve into somebody calling somebody else Hitler. The first person that calls the person Hitler loses. That's the first thing that came to mind when I saw them pushing hard on this, when they started showing photos or video of the 1939 rally, Hitler Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden.
Oh,
when
that
they started,
one. Oh, yeah.
When they started running that as the Madison Square Garden rally was running, I realized my contempt and actual hatred for these people is I didn't think could get any higher, but it is. I do a lot of history, done a lot of history series and things like that, and you can take our hurt feelings and our outrage that we feel at being compared to Nazis, and you can put that on the table. That's not where the real crime here is. The real crime here is that 6 million Jews and another 6 million or 7 million homosexuals, people with mental disabilities, gypsies and so on, were exterminated by the Nazis. And Donald Trump hasn't exterminated a single human being, and neither have the people that support him. What they do by calling us Nazis is not just a rhetorical swipe at us out of desperation. It essentially eliminates the victims of real Nazism. Yeah. It turns them into nothing. It turns them into nothing. It basically says that being a supporter of Donald Trump is the same as being an SS guard and shooting people in the back of the head at the edge of a pit. And so all of the people that were actually shot and killed by the SS and by the Nazis, all of the millions of people who lined up and went into the gas chambers, are the moral equivalent of people who stand out and occasionally put up a sign saying we'd like a smaller government. There's no difference between the two. And so what you do is you eliminate the victims of Nazihood by this comparison, and it doesn't the outrage that I feel by being called a Nazi by these people is real, and I know a lot of Americans feel it, but the crime of history is Donald Trump is precisely like Adolf Hitler. If it weren't for the 52 million people that died as a result of Adolf Hitler, other than that, they're absolutely identical. And what do you do about 52 million people who died in World War II as a result of that man's insane ambitions? Where do they go? they go down the memory hole is where they go. They go down it's not the memory hole, Steve, it's the rhetorical. They go down the rhetorical. They've been rhetoriced out of existence by this cheap, low, and desperate shot. And what, to me, more than anything indicates is that they not only are losing, they know they're losing, they know they've lost. And they are just flailing around now. And this has something to do with my topic this week. So
I look forward to that.
Yeah.
And everybody here on BillWhittle.com or Rumble or YouTube, wherever you watch this, you should look forward to that too. Scott, I want to get back to this campaign element because we're seeing what I think is the fourth iteration of the Kamala Harris campaign. She began by playing the role of the safe incumbent. She avoided the media, even as friendly as most media outlets are to Democrats, and trying to shore up support with traditional Democrat constituencies. But that wasn't working. Her polls were slipping pretty quickly, so Harris painted Trump as the incumbent. I don't know if you remember that phase of the campaign.
Sure, she's running as a challenger.
Yeah, while stealing signature policies like border security. And that wasn't working, so Harris turned herself, and this is only like 2 weeks ago, she became the media maven. She was on 60 Minutes, she was on NBC News, she even talked to Bret Baier on Fox News. And you probably don't need me to remind you that not even some selective and misleading edits made by the 60 Minutes crew could save Harris from her self-inflicted media disasters in Phase 3. And now we're in Phase 4, which is calling literally everybody literally Hitler. Does that strike you as a campaign that's flailing?
Well, it doesn't seem like things are going well for her. And I think Bill is right. Once you descend to the point, there's no place to go from Nazi. There's no worse allegation that you can make, and it cheapens the loss and sacrifice of so many millions of lives that were victims of true Nazis. And this is hard to even say because I don't want to do the same thing, but that's rather rich coming from the mouth of somebody who's running for president on a platform of the right to kill millions of babies. I don't think that you ought to start crowing about your opponent's Nazihood when your platform is calling for freedom to eliminate infants in the womb. When she did those interviews, I'm sure you've seen the coverage. When she did the interview with Bret Baier, Fox made it very clear to her that she had to show up at a certain time because they had to record the interview and then turn it around for the top of the next hour to be able to broadcast it. Apparently, she intentionally showed up late for this interview, cutting the interview substantially shorter than they would have wanted to make it, and then made their comments afterward all about the fact that she was interrupted by the interviewer during the 22 minutes that she had left. A week or so later, Donald Trump sits down with Joe Rogan and talks to him for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I thought, now, a lot of it was kind of a rambling conversation, but I thought, what are the odds that Kamala Harris is ever going to sit down with any interviewer and have an unstructured conversation for 3 hours? What are the odds that she could hold up under that kind of a situation? She is so constrained by her canned responses that I don't think she'd be capable of doing it. Anyway, it's to make a comparison, even with the American Nazi Party, which rallied in Madison Square Garden in the 1930s, and any modern political campaign, just shows a sense of desperation when she should be, and she told us she was, the candidate of joy. Remember that? That was the opening announcement. I'm the candidate of joy. She spoke before the Democratic National Convention about what a joyful candidacy this was going to be. And now, days before the final day of voting, she has devolved into somebody who feels like she has to make Hitler comparisons in order to desperately scrape out a victory.
And Scott, you know what, Steve, you just remind. Oh, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just real quick. This is like a fundamental piece of rhetorical judo that we just seem to be incapable of doing. It's so easy. We fell into the trap of referring to them as Nazis. Every time we got called Nazis, we should have responded by, You're calling us National Socialists?
Yeah.
You're saying that we're National Socialists because we're held, same rally as... You're saying that Hitler's National Socialist Party is the same as the Republican Party? We should have gone back to National Socialism. That's what Nazi is a contraction of National Sozialistische Deutschland Partei. The National Socialist German Workers' Party is what Nazi is. You can't spell Nazi without National Socialist Worker Party. And we simply should have just kept throwing the socialist in there, you know what I mean? Because I didn't name the Nazis. They named themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And Scott, what you reminded me of, let's go back to 2016 and the last time the Democrats ran somebody so unskilled and unlikable at the top of their ticket. Hillary Clinton's big thing wasn't joy, it was love trumps hate, while she was calling half of the country deplorables.
Steve, can I throw in one other
yeah.
thing? When I ran for office many years ago, I told the volunteers who were helping me, many of whom are college students, but there were others that were closer to my age. When I was going door to door, I said, look, when you meet somebody who is a Democrat, you're going to be trying to win their vote. When you meet somebody, you never, as you're going door to door, you never insult the other party. Because even if that person is a Republican and you start slamming Democrats or making them seem like they're evil or mentally deficient or whatever, that voter behind that screen door may be thinking, my grandfather was a Democrat. My grandfather was in the Union over at the steel plant. And
Yep.
why are you saying this about my grandfather? And that they become defensive. So when you're trying to win votes, your strategy is not to see, when you insult the person at the top of the ticket like that, you are insulting everybody in the movement. And what she's going to achieve from this is higher Republican turnout.
And all of this comes down to one simple thing, that Harris has never really been tested. And this is why I think her campaign is flailing. She came up through California Bay Area politics. Oh, and just an aside on that, I saw a clip on Twitter this morning, X this morning. Harris was touring a chip fab, I think maybe in Arizona. And at the end of the tour, when she's thanking everybody, she couldn't remember the word silicon. Now, this is a woman who grew up in the Bay Area. She spent her entire her entire professional life up until she moved to Washington, D.C. in the Bay Area, and never somehow bothered to learn what they meant by Silicon Valley. It's right there.
Did you see the clip where they told her before the tour, don't touch anything. Some of this stuff looks really shiny, but it's like razor sharp. And she gets to one little display, and a scientist is explaining what's going on there, and she's like, "Can I touch that?" And the scientist goes, "Do not touch that." And she goes, she's like, "Oh, do not touch it. I'm glad I asked."
She's more a product of Silicon Valley than Silicon Valley, if you really want to.
Now.
That may be true. My point is this. Coming up in the Bay Area as a progressive Democrat, once somebody like Nancy Pelosi or Willie Brown opens the donor spigot to you, you're set for life. Your political career is set. She has never really been tested. The one time she started to be tested was in the 2020 Democratic primaries, and she dropped out in 2019 before they even held the vote in Iowa. She is not a skilled candidate because she's never had to hone those skills. And Joe Biden selected her as vice president, not because she was any good at it, but because he talked himself into a corner yet again by saying he was going to name a female person of color as his VP. And so it was either Kamala Harris or Stacey Abramson down and she was too busy pretending to be governor of Georgia, so that wasn't going to work. So we were stuck with this vice president who has never been tested, who then was anointed the Democrat presidential candidate after they kicked Joe Biden out. And here she is having to run a serious campaign for the first time in her life at the very highest level. And boy, does it show. Well, that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Thanks so much for watching, and the next time we see you, this will all be over.